Boy X by Dan Smith, page 156. When we last left off, Ash and Isabel had just gotten to the old military bunker where they were going to take shelter for the night. And Ash is just a little bit worried about the monkeys, whether or not they're going to follow them in and be dangerous. So page 156, it's 15 hours and 57 minutes until shutdown. The old bunker was littered with rubble, and the walls were crawling with moss. "Be careful where you stand," Isabel said. Close to the door, there was a large, tattered opening where the floor had collapsed into the darkness below. Metal reinforcement bars protruded from the edges like a witch's clawing fingers. Chunks of concrete clung to them in places. There was a similar hole in the ceiling, which would have let in light during the day. They skirted around the hole and went deeper into the room. When they were a safe distance from it, Isabel put down the fruit and sank to the floor. "How do you feel?" Ash didn't really need to ask, and he didn't need to use his heightened senses to know that she was exhausted. For the first time since she had mentioned it by the river, Ash was beginning to consider that he might have to continue on alone. "We need to make a fire," she said, "but I don't think I can get my hands to work. I'm cold. Is it cold in here?" "Yeah, it's cold." Ash couldn't feel it, though. He hadn't been hot in the jungle, and he wasn't cold now. "You want me to try getting a fire going? You got matches or something?" Isabel frowned. "I had waterproof matches in my pack." "Oh." Ash pictured all their gear being washed away down the river. "Nothing else?" "There's a fire steel on the sheath of your knife. Do you know how to use it?" "I think so." Dad had showed him a few different ways to make a fire without matches, so Ash pulled his knife from its sheath, grabbed a thin, dry stick from the wood pile, and began whittling. He stopped every now and then to scoop the shavings together, and when there were enough, he arranged a teepee of sticks around it. After that, he took out the fire steel and scraped the back of his knife along it. His first attempt was useless, so he repeated the action until he was showering the tinder with sparks. The ends of some pieces began to glow, and small tendrils of smoke rose from them. "That's it." He cupped his hands around the teepee, blowing gently until the flames grew, then sat back and fed the fire with more wood. The orange, flickering light revealed a room about half the size of a school gym. In the far corner, a rotten table with only 3 legs was pushed up against the wall, leaning at an awkward angle. Underneath it was a pile of empty, rusted tins, a ragged mound of papers, a beaten-up typewriter, and a rotten boot with the sole peeling away from the leather. There was a dirty tarp in there, too, twisted and wrinkled like a decayed corpse. On the adjacent wall stood a wonky row of corroded filing cabinets, while 1 or 2 of the others lay on their sides like dead monsters. Thrown up on top of them was a cage, much like the kind a dog owner might have for their pet. The walls were just bare concrete, but the one to the left of the entrance was painted with a faded black eagle with its wings spread wide. Ash studied the eagle with the growing sensation that he had seen it before, this exact one, right here on this wall. "You've been here before," said the voice, "but that's our little secret." No, that wasn't possible. He must have seen it in a picture, maybe in a book. He went over to the table and touched the toe of his boot to the papers, trying to spark a memory. "Papa said we have to leave everything as we find it. There might be something important about the island." "What's through there?" Ash pointed to a door opposite the entrance. "Other rooms, and some stairs going below. Papa said not to go. It's too dangerous." Ash nodded, but he wanted to know what was down there. He had such a strong sensation that he'd been there before, and he wanted to prove himself wrong. He went over to the fire to pull out a burning stick and then crept towards the edge of the hole. "Be careful," Isabel didn't need to tell him, though. As soon as he saw that gaping, bottomless pit, Ash had to stop himself from thinking about falling in. His stomach lurched the same way it had done when the rope snapped on the river crossing. Dust cascaded from the broken edges as he inched closer. There was a soft sound down there, the shuffle of leathery wings. The light from the burning stick wasn't strong enough to reach the bottom, but daring to peer closer, Ash could see the light reflected in something below. "There's water down there." He let go of the burning stick and watched it fall for a couple of seconds before it hit a pile of rubble on the floor more than 20 feet below. It erupted into an explosion of sparks, causing a flurry of clicking and clattering that made him step back in alarm. When the sound died down and he risked another look, the stick had settled into a slowly fading burn, and he could see that the room beneath was more or less the same size as the one they were in. Black, stinking water shimmered from wall to wall like an oil slick, and there was an island of rubble in the middle, where the floor above had caved in. 4 or 5 rusted barrels lay part submerged, and one wall was stacked high with cages. Others were lying in the rancid water. Ash could also make out a large table and a couple of benches, various bottles and jars, and more papers. "Wouldn't want to fall down there," he said. "What is all that stuff?" "Papa thinks it was used for experiments a long time ago. He said some of the papers looked like research, but he didn't know what." Yeah, let's see here. There we go. Nope. Sorry, technical difficulties this morning. "The cages must have been for animals. Better to keep away, I think." Warmed by the flames, Isabel was starting to sound better. She removed her boots and socks and placed them near the fire to dry, then lifted her t-shirt away from her body, wafting it in the heat. "You did a good job with the fire," she said. "I'm sorry Forget it." Ash came back and sat beside her. He untied his laces and removed his boots. "It's weird. I feel like I've seen this place before. It's like déjà vu. You know that word?" "Yes," she said. "Maybe you have seen a photo." "Yeah, maybe." Isabel watched him from across the fire, eyes sparkling. "You hungry?" "Starving. We could catch some frogs and insects, cook them on the fire. Very tasty." Maybe I'm not that hungry after all." Isabel snorted. "Or these." She picked up one of the large yellow fruits and cut it in half lengthways. She did the same thing, again separating into 4 long pieces, then scraped away the black seeds before passing one to Ash. "Papaya," she said, taking a large bite. "Much better than frog." Ash sniffed the fruit, thinking it smelled like the best thing ever, then nibbled the edge. The flavor exploded in his mouth like fireworks. Mom was always telling him to eat more fruit, that it was good for him, but if he had known that it could taste like this, he would have eaten much more of it. His fingers were sticky, and the juice ran from the corners of his mouth as he wolfed down the soft, delicious flesh and put the rind to one side. Isabel grinned and passed him another. "Good, But we can go and look for frogs if you don't like it." Ash shook his head and bit into the second piece. "No way." He began to settle for the first time since waking up in the white room. The glow of the fire and the crackling of the burning sticks was soothing, and the fresh wood smoke hid the unpleasant smells of the building as it rose to escape through the hole in the ceiling. He thought about everything he'd been through and how good Isabel was in the jungle. "You learn all that stuff from your dad about the animals and fruits?" Isabel nodded and put her second piece of rind beside the other. She sat back and crossed her legs, staring into the base of the fire. "In San Jose, where we lived before Papa took this job, we sometimes traveled out into the forest on the weekends, and sometimes for longer. Papa grew up with it and wants me to know the forest too." A distant smile crossed her lips. Mama loved the forest too, but... She stared into the fire, her eyes filling with tears. The smoke, she lied. It always itches. Did something happen to your mom? Ash asked. She was very ill with cancer. It was a long time ago. And I miss her every day. Today, I miss her a lot. She wiped her eyes. Ash watched her through the flames. My dad died. His voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. Last week. I'm going to stop there so that it doesn't get too long and I'm able to upload it.